Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. Our presentation today is a game of drones, operating drones in a complex emergency management environment. My name is Leslie Luke. I'm with the Los Angeles County Office of Emergency Management. I'm also on the conference committee. And I want to take this opportunity now to introduce Dr. Michael Brown. Dr. Michael Brown is the president of One World, One Way, Inc. The Policy Institute conducts research on many topics related to emergency management. He has a PhD in emergency management, a master's in emergency management, and has spent time in the intelligence community. Dr. Brown is an adjunct professor at Park University, where he teaches graduate level disaster and emergency management principles. So join me in welcoming Dr. Brown.
Thank you. I appreciate it. First of all, let me do a test. Where's my tech guy? Yeah. Let me say this. Some of you may think that what I'm going to talk about today is about technology. I'm not going to talk about technology, and right now I'm having a technical problem. What I'm going to talk about is how technology actually drives policy. If you notice the music, and if you're familiar with that music and the theme that goes along with that music, you'll know that that music indicates complexity, difficulty, and problems. The game of drones is basically how I'm going to approach that. And as I stated earlier, this has nothing to do with technology. How many of you in the audience actually have access to a UAV? Not bad. I may be calling on you to let me know some of the difficulty you may have experienced in trying to get that technology. And that's why I'm approaching this today. The word complex, the definition is difficult parts and complicated situations all brought together, but difficult to analyze. Very difficult to analyze. And that's what we're dealing with today. A lot of you have had difficulty in trying to understand what it is that's being asked of you, because you're seeing recreational vehicles being purchased and being taken, and people going in and getting these and flying them. And we in emergency management and public safety are having to, in some words and testimonies, jump through hoops in order to get something that will strengthen the resilience, the response of our own communities. And there's a lot of angst about that, particularly towards some of our partners, the FAA being a particular partner. And I can guarantee you that they're doing everything that they can in order to try to assist us. I got an email about a month ago from an emergency management brethren of ours who sent me an email, and basically I'll just kind of go into this. He goes, "We cannot use our UAS until we get our COA. We cannot fly it even if we get it because we are near an airport. We are near a heliport. We now have it in the closet. Help." But he blames some of the partners for this particular issue. I would love to go to the next slide, but technology is not helping me right now. So I'm just going to move forward. How many of you would agree that this is complicated? Repeat after me. It's complicated. I didn't hear you. It's complicated. It's very complicated. But it's not the technology that's making it complicated. We are a business. Emergency management is a business. And basically in that business, our business is to decrease risk, deal with vulnerabilities, increase resilience, strengthen the whole community. That's our business. That's what we do. UAVs would exponentially help us in doing that, which is why some of us don't understand why it's being made very difficult for us, at least in our perception, to do it. But there's a good reason for that. How are we doing back there, fellas?
Your slides are working on your computer. We're trying to get it to connect to the screen.
That'll work for me. We'll just move forward here. I apologize for the inconvenience because those slides would really help us move forward. And I'll move to the next one. But everybody agrees that emergency management is in fact a business. What is the single most worst thing for a business? What complicates a business?
Lawyers.
Oh, okay, granted. 2 thumbs up. Besides lawyers, the thing that complicates, I should have thought of that one. The thing that complicates business is uncertainty. Uncertainty complicates business. Would you say that right now we're in a period of uncertainty? We do not have a law, we do not have regulations that actually tell us from the top up, from Congress, telling us what we can and cannot do regarding, thank you, drones, UAVs. We don't have that. Now, this is really ironic because most of the time you would hear us complain that we're getting these top-down things coming down to us, and we would be moaning about it. And here's the time now where, believe it or not, Congress, the FAA, which are the whipping dogs right now of Congress, poor guys, they're our partners, they are saying, we want you in your community to come to us and help us make some decisions. By the way, that's not a UAV, that's a drone, but it's an ignorant drone. It just sits there, but it does what you tell it. It's not autonomous. It's not autonomous. But right now, Congress, believe it or not, are waiting for us to aid them. This is unusual. This is unheard of. It has happened before. You just weren't aware of it. It has happened. It happened in the 70s when the governors got together and said, enough of duck and cover. We would like some of those funds to be utilized for natural disasters. Wow. 4 phases and all hazards later, here we are. It happened again, and some of you might be familiar with this term, fire scope. Fire scope. And see, this is really beautiful because I think this is going to set the stage for where we're going to go next. 50 states get together and kind of tell Uncle Sam, dual use systems, we need to use those funds elsewhere, and it'll work better here. Fire scope. Bunch of fire guys, other brethren of emergency management. Some of you are fire guys that are emergency managers, very good guys because they're very meticulous. Got together and left all of their egos at the door and said, fellas, we need to deal with this. We got to work this out. We got to come together as a team. Fire scope is developed, and we get what? IMS, Incident Management System. And today it has given us its baby sister, the Incident Command System. But we did that. You know how we did that? I'm not going to give it up. We did that. We did that through lessons learned, and that's something that's in every emergency management person's blood. How do we learn? Lessons learned. Remember that right now. That's very important. Lessons learned. This is another type of drone, and we're going to talk about these, what drones can and what they can't do. This changed everything. Do you remember this? Dallas? Does anybody remember Dallas? Last couple of months? Oh yeah. Some gentleman up here says Employee of the Month. There was one of these carried what? What did it carry?
A 1 pound block of steel.
1 pound block of C4. Let me tell you something, that changes the calculus. What if you put that 1 pound pound of C4 on a UAV? Things could get real serious. UAVs can also do good things. Resuscitation right now in parts of Africa and other rural areas, they're delivering medicines and other supplies, doing wonderful things. I predict in the future they will be large enough once we get through this quagmire of legislation and stuff we're going through. They'll be large enough to extract firefighters from dangerous areas and other people, go in, put them down. I know it's the Star Trek thing, and pull them out. Anybody remember this one? White House lawn. Found on the White House lawn. So, you know, these UAVs help us, but they've also brought in a new asymmetric platform for possible nefarious acts. Serious issues. But remember, right now, it's very difficult for public safety, emergency management operators. It's a little difficult for some of you to meet COA, the exemptions. I can guarantee you that most attorney generals in the state's not going to sign a waiver. They don't want to be responsible from what I'm hearing. Wonderful. But we can also use UAVs now to go in and to help us before this acts. But there's people always standing around. Oops, that's predator number uno. Nobody can have that one right now. We don't want that one up on the screen. But inevitably, this is what happens. Air operations are trying to go in, they're trying to suppress fires. And I heard from a lady yesterday who actually works in California, and they had these issues going on, and they were trying to deal with it, and somebody wants to film it. Somebody wants to endanger the lives of the very people that are trying to deal with this. What is it? It's complicated. I didn't hear you. It's complicated. It's very complicated. This is the way we'd really like it to work going forward. Doing a search, area, and rescue. We'd like it to work like that, where there's nobody out there. It's not a problem. You can look. Yes, sir.
If I remember correctly, there was a aerial tanker mission, basically the big water bucket in the sky, where multiple missions got canceled because somebody was flying a drone around the
Right.
perimeter of the fire.
What he was saying was that he remembers that there was a big bucket in the sky. It was one of the aircraft that are dropping suppressive materials for fires, and they had to stop that operation because persons were utilizing UAVs in area, and it endangers not only the lives of the pilots, but also the people on the ground, and more than that, you can't move forward with your operation. In this particular case, this is wonderful, unless your wife or your spouse or somebody is out there sunbathing. So now we got another issue. We got the issue of privacy and protection. You know, I have the right to fly my UAV anywhere I want. It's my property. You fly it up high enough, it's not quite 400 feet, but you can see what's going on in the backyard of the next door neighbor. You have an issue here. So now we got privacy issues, but you have to protect my rights, and you have protection issues, but you think what you're doing is innocent. And this is the thing that keeps DHS and the FBI and everybody up late at night. That right there is the kiss of death. Of course, that's a master drone. That's a big drone. And you know what, it would probably be cited because they have to be, what, 50, 55 pounds? And yeah, I think that's a little outside of our realm of, how do you charge? He wants to know how we charge that one. You leave it alone. you leave that one alone. But right now, where I want you to be is lessons learned and best practices. I want that to be ever in your mind. Lessons, there's nobody that knows more about lessons learned. William Waugh, Professor Waugh, 2000, wrote a book, and in that book he says, you know what? Emergency managers may be a lot of things, but inconspicuous is not one of them. Nobody knows of you until stuff goes south. You are constantly planning, constantly working and getting prepared, understaffed, underfunded, not appreciated. But all of a sudden, when there's an incident, the guys with the big fat cigars and all that are going, what are you going to do? And you've got to perform. And there's no room for error. Because what's going to happen, folks, when it doesn't go right? It's only one time, big response. What happens when you don't get it right? You were right out there front, and you're the one that's going to pay for it. Not your boss, not the politicians. You're going to pay for it. So what do? We got to do prior planning. Prevents poor performance. Everyone's seen this, I'm sure. We're right here and we're planning. We've got an incident, we've got an emergency, we've got something that's coming up, and we're going to go here so we can plan, right? Is this an easy task for anybody that's ever done it? It's complicated. What's the most complicated part of this? The forms. The forms. So how do you account for, some of you have access to UAVs, right? How many of you do not have access to UAVs if you have an incident or an issue? A couple of you. Have not had, you don't have access. When you do that, how do you account for the hours, the payment? If you're using this UAV, should there be insurance or a rider on your policy, even though you're using maybe someone else's? Have your attorneys reviewed this? If you're using through a memorandum of understanding, if you're using someone else's drone and they're using it for you, they have it insured, but should you have it insured? And are you filling out, you've got to fill out all the necessary forms in order to record everything that you've used this drone for money purposes. You're going to evaluate your situation. You're going to develop the incident objectives. We're going to go through this whole thing. You all know this better than I do. You're going to get down. But you've made a decision. If you don't have a UAV, or you may need more UAVs, you're going to make a decision that, wait a minute, I need to get a UAV. Where are you going to get one if you need additional resources? Does anyone know? Yes, sir. Right. Are there any other resources? How can you be sure that the individuals that are utilizing these UAVs know what they're doing? I don't know how many stories I've heard where the young tech guy in the fire department or whatever that actually has one is using this UAV, and they haven't done all the necessary things that they should have done in order to make sure that, one, he absolutely or she absolutely knows what they're doing. The National Emergency Response and Rescue Training Center, TEACS, down in Texas, has a program, and I want to make sure I get that program right. And if any of you are interested, you can see me afterwards. It's the National Unmanned Aircraft System Credentialing Program. And the person that's running that down there is a gentleman by the name of Steve Williams. And what it is for each of the states, they're actually credentialing groups who can actually use these UAVs, the FAA approved, DHS approved, and you can rely on them because that's where we're going towards in the future. We'll get to questions. Yes. Well, his name is Steve Williams. Well, you can see me after we talk, and I'm going to give you a list, if you would like, of all the different contacts you need. We have somebody in the FAA, Miss Danielle Corbett. We have other individuals that I want you to get in touch with if you have questions. And they're going to have, because a lot of the problem that we're seeing is that there's no one you can call that can actually answer, oh, wait a minute, can I actually fly it in this airspace if it's E? This Class E airspace? How do I find out if it's Class E and not Class G? How do I do this? Do I contact the ATC? Or can I actually do this? Or do I need a waiver for this? And how do I get the waiver? And when you call, sometimes you get frustrated because nobody actually knows. Well, some of the names of the people I give you will have answers to those questions and tell you about programs that you may not know about. So we get here. This here is a net-centric approach for utilizing your UAVs. I'm going to try to speed through this a little quick because most of you may know it. And this was done by Dr. Steve Jensen at the University of California in Long Beach. Basically, when you do actually get your UAV, you're looking to use it for what? For collecting information. And then you better decide what type of payload you're going to need to collect the information that you're going to get. This is a problem. Because depending on what you're dealing with, either a flood, a seismic issue, or a fire, or search and rescue, you're going to choose one of these particular items. This complicates it a little bit. You make your selection, you choose it, you start your processing portion of it, you send it up. You're going to integrate it with either satellite systems or other systems that you have. I'm going to try to breeze through this quick. But you're going to have a team now. Either Fido is going to have a little GPS on him and it's going to have a little drone following him. He's doing search and rescue. That's one of the sheriff departments that I was dealing with did. They wanted to find somebody who was lost. They put a little gadget on him and said, go boy. He goes, the drone follows him. They follow the drone. They have pictures, videos, and they find the person. They worked as a team. How to operate it. Some of you may have seen this before. You send it up on a flight plane, you got your observer. This is pretty self-explanatory. You collect all this information. You got all this information, right? You're actually in the middle of an incident. You've collected this information. Do you have anybody that can analyze this information? Particularly if it's information that you're not used to. Is there anybody at your site that can analyze what it is that you just picked up? A lot of people forget this. Are there people in your rear echelon areas where this is being transmitted at the same time who can give you real-time information about what it is that you just saw? Very important. And how are you going to feed this? I heard something yesterday in a presentation. Who are you going to send that information to so they don't have any angst or problems? What other stakeholders are also getting that information so that you can aid them and assist them as well going forward? Folks, it's not easy. It's complicated. Repeat after me. It's complicated. Okay, so what that does, though, it gives us a common picture, common operating picture. We've heard that term before. So now you've got all this information that's come in. You've got all your supplies and everything. You've got everything going, and you've got a common operating picture. This is self-explanatory. This is courtesy of Ted Ralston. He's in Hawaii. I call him Uncle. He's a 70-something-year-old guy who still surfs, full of knowledge. I'm going to give you his number. Recently, he called me up and he said, you know, Mike, we had an exercise with George Purdy at Lanai Airport in Hawaii. Now, what they were doing was they were simulating a crash at the airport, and they wanted to use a UAV in order to do what? Get lessons learned to develop best practices so that they could move all of this uncertainty along. Well, there are other sites that are doing the same thing. Folks, let me tell you something. That is a controlled environment. Anyone who's ever been in a real incident knows it's not a controlled environment. What I'm trying to say to you is that they need your input, because there are things that can happen not in a controlled environment that Mr. Purdy at the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center would love to hear from you about, because that's going to help them going forward. These are kind of views you can get using some of those payloads I talked about, wide angle views. These were taken from the Philippines with Dr. Steve Jensen when he went over there and doing a disaster area. Local area assessments. We've seen some of these videos before. Looking at structures, infrared, some of the things you can use these items for. There's no doubt that UAVs are looking for issues with utilities, blackouts, with communications. There's no doubt that they're good. So where are you going to place it? According to Steve Williams, you're going to place it under your air operations. That's the best place to place it. Provides continuity. You don't have aircraft flying. If they are, then you know what's going on. How are you going to protect your own drones? Geofencing. Congress is trying to work with us. Senator Charles Schumer is someone who has already initiated a bill wanting every single UAV to have some sort of geofencing. So we do have some support in Congress. So there's some people there that actually get it, that understand the technology. But it's not just the technology that's driving this. And that is actually being used in Europe, Scandinavia. They're actually using. Yes, sir.
Define geofencing?
Geofencing is quite interesting because I have my own take on geofencing. But geofencing is utilizing technologies. I'll give you an example. I went to to another convention, and they had a geofencing technology there that actually picked up on the rotary sensory, the noises of other types of drones. In particular, Mercedes-Benz in Germany are using geofencing. The competition were using miniature drones to fly up and watch the testing that was being done by Mercedes-Benz. So they hired this geofencing firm, and what that technology does is you use it, and it has a limited range, a distance, a limited width, and it will actually hear and be able to identify the actual type of drone and locate it. But there are other technologies that are associated with the military that I won't talk about, but I believe, and you bring up a good point, because there are some laws on our books that I believe are antiquated, and one is the Federal Communications Act, some of those laws that don't allow jamming in the country. And this is a law from 1934. Well, I think going forward with our national security issues, that there should be some waivers for certain technologies in the hands of public safety. And that needs to be looked at. The Communications Liaison Act for law enforcement should be looked at. Patriot Act. When these people use these tools in an inappropriate manner or a nefarious manner, what type of penalty should address it? We saw the same thing with cyber security, where people were doing cyber crimes, but you're going, well, how am I going to, what's the law, what's the applicable law? Well, we can do it in advance, and nobody knows more about doing mitigation than we do. So we need to think about these going forward. But that's one of the other things that's keeping Congress from making decisions. They want to know what we think about those issues, those very issues. How are we going to, they have projectiles. There's a company in California that actually uses projectiles. Very, very accurate projectiles that take down drones. And that's a serious piece of geofencing. Oh yes, we won't go into that. We don't want to talk about that here. So at the end of the day, what we've decided is that we need best practices. And this is something that we're experts at, because that's what we do. Every time we have an incident or something occurs, we've learned from it. We've learned from observing it. Richard T. Silves, emeritus professor, states in that, what is best practices? Well, best practices are something that we do from observation, and we observe all the time. One of the things we do when we do our evaluations, not talking about tabletop exercises, when we actually have an incident, we document everything that occurred and everything that we did wrong, and we go back and try to fix it. This is something that most people do not do. Most professions don't do that. Well, stop whining about Congress not having a law, because they're waiting for us. Now, what they're doing is this. We're going to delve into a little bit of theory, but it's going to be very light. There won't be a test. But basically, we're going to delve into this. Rational action theory, or rational choice theory. It's just the way to filter and to weigh cost versus benefit. Cost versus benefit. Well, a couple of conditions have to exist before Congress is going to touch this. One, they need to figure out what we think as a whole community about UAVs and what's going on with UAVs. They need to know our values and where we are. Who do we have playing? We've got retailers that want to sell them. We got the agricultural industry that want to use them. We have utility companies that need to use them. They save lives, they save money. We have the recreational people that want to fly them for fun. We have us, public safety, emergency managers, who want to use these as tools to strengthen our own response and, frankly, all of the mission areas. That's what we want, but we have more to lose than somebody who's using it for recreation. We've got a lot more to lose. So they want to know what we think, and then number two, they want to go ahead and take these alternatives, everything that's on the board, and they need to weigh it. And this is not an economic issue. This is a social issue. Remember we talked about privacy and protection? Those come in it. What do we lose if we do this? Are we violating somebody's rights if we do this? If we allow this guy who shot down this drone in his neighbor's yard, does he have a right to do that? The law needs to address that. So Congress needs to gather all these alternatives, and then they need to go, let's do a cost-benefit ratio analysis. And they need to look at each one of those and go, what is it going to cost us, and what are we going to benefit from it? After they do that, they take all of these alternatives and they come up with a very transparent methodology of doing it. So we trust what they did, that they did it in the right way, and they provide something to us with alternatives, and then they tell us, this is what we've come up with, and then they have to say, okay, this is the law, this is what we've got, and then everybody's happy. Not really, because when you put rational and you put Congress in the same room, come on, folks, it's complicated. But that's what's going on. What do they have right now to make any decision regarding alternatives? Nothing. What do they really know about nefarious acts? Nothing. What do they really know about all of the technologies that are evolving every day? Swarm technologies at the Naval Operations Center. All these new technologies that are going on. Nothing. So what is happening now is all of these test centers that are out there, all of the emergency managers, and all of these things, everyone that's using a UAV, if you're documenting this and you're giving this information to your FAA contact, your contacts at the National Disaster Preparedness Consortiums, whatever they may be, because they're all involved, universities, your other stakeholders, if you're providing this information about your narrative, about your experience, it gives them something to work with. Because I can guarantee you every single incident is different. But right now they can't make any decisions. And that's why this is such a complex environment. Congress has provided no laws, no guidance, and this is one of the first times that things are really coming from the bottom up. This is our opportunity to show them how it's done. Hey, here's what I observed. Here's what happened when we did our last. Here's what happened when we responded to this. We had an actual earthquake and we used it for this. And who are our liaison? The people we need to talk to? The FAA. So we don't want to beat them up, because I hear a lot of people beating those folks up. But they're our partners at the end of the day. Reaching out to TEEX. I'm sure everybody in here has had TEEX 300, 400. Those people are really doing some wonderful things down in Texas and Hawaii and a few other places. But at the end of the day, if they know what's happened with your particular incident, and some of you may be still going, I was really surprised at how many people have access to UAVs, because this is a first for me. The majority of individuals I'm coming into contact with do not. Okay, enough of that. I want to hear some of your stories about what you may have experienced, if you would like to share them with the rest of us. Any questions? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Steve Nance from Marine Corps Logistics Base Albany, Georgia. We partner up with the Ham Radio Club because we don't have our own ham radio operators. Has anybody partnered up with the recreational club that uses UASs participate with emergency management. Have you heard anything of that nature?
No, and that was quite excellent. Did everybody hear this? He was talking about the Ham Radio Club. They partnered with the recreational drone users in order to use that as an additional resource in order to assist them in emergency operations. Yes, sir.
So if you live in Oregon and Washington, I'm actually a Pascal Shrek. I work for a Pesky Region Earthquake Working Group.
Okay.
In DC, Oregon, Washington, Northern California. So come help us with the earthquakes, people need it. But I'm building a Pacific Northwest drone response team so that it works with the states in general. It's an overarching hub of the Attorney General's office, trying to get all the legalities set up and everything else. So that way you don't have 39 counties in each state doing it themselves. But we also can then bring in the amateurs and the professionals who have their 107 license, who have a business, who do this every day, that they're trained, they're credentialed, and they're managed. But then they can go anywhere as a resource through the state, which is through the air boss and the operations center. It's all controlled. And then also the data gets managed. There's ownership to the data.
Right. And you know what that does? You know what that does? You know what you do? What you've done is you've taken control of some of those individuals that may have impeded your operation, and now they become a partner and they're part of your operation. And it's absolutely brilliant. And those are some of the things that if you're doing anything, if I'm looking at an EOP or whatever, I'm going, wow, that's really nice. I want to make sure we do that. We'll get them all to be members. Now they become a resource. They know they need to go to the staging area. They know they need to report in, and that's the way it works. Yes, sir.
To Steve's point over here, we're asking them to do us, so what's in it for them? And what's in it for them is we're the people with access to the TEACS national certification. We're people with access to many training programs and resources.
Yeah, there we go.
We're the people with access to training and resources and official certification that these guys want. So no, you can't go there as a hobbyist, but you can certainly go as the representative from my collaborative organization, and I'll give you my slot, but you work for me.
And a purpose.
And a purpose, right? Exactly that. What you said, you've taken the people that might be in your way and have them working for you and helping you.
That's right. And yes, sir.
Good morning. My name's Lyle Hendrick. I'm with Fluor. We're one of the top 5 global construction firms, and I'm here at the conference one reason specifically to hear your presentation, and it's a great presentation for starters.
Thank you.
You already spurred a couple of thoughts and ideas. One question is working CONUS versus OCONUS.
Right.
Because we do have so many operations, so many countries. You know, how do we bring the technology and the other things with it? Because I guess we're all in some way pathfinders,
right,
in this group.
That's right.
And the last thing, because you just inspired a thought, you know, if anybody is interested, I was thinking of forming a group on Facebook, Fourth is Very Group. So I'll put up a flag and rally around. I'd like your cards.
I appreciate the question. I'll tell you this right now, we've already started it because this is IAEM. And IAEM is international. So that was kind of an easy one. So we'll get some of the exposure that we need just by you being here. That's wonderful. Yes, sir. Believe it or not, I'm saying you. Here you go.
Good morning. I'm Zack Morris from the University of Vermont. We actually have a UAS team. We've partnered with Massachusetts Task Force 1. We've partnered with Vermont Task Force 1 and exercised with them at Vigilant Guard, which was our statewide exercise we just did. Our team, 90% of the time, they're flying sort of non-disaster commercial operations. And then when something happens, we team up with whoever tasks us. We were funded through a U.S. Department of Transportation grant. Something that I've been trying to pitch is U.S. Department of Transportation researches everything before they actually introduce it out to the world. So everything that a state DOT and everything else has done has been vetted through usually the AASHTO organization. DHS doesn't really have that. We should, because that whole process connected us with federal partners, local partners, and we've flown hundreds and hundreds of flights now. We've got 333 exemptions. We're Part 107 compliant. We can fly any type of mission you throw at us. uvm.edu/tilde-UAS if you want to check it out.
And that's good, Zach. And I would tell Zach that I'd like you to get in touch with Steve Williams and make sure you get on that credential. You already emailed him? Great. That's excellent. Outstanding. Anyone else have any other questions? Yes, sir.
Jeremy Hines from the City of Henderson. For those of you who are using that Aries Races club model, was there an insurance issue as far as who takes that claim, as far as would it be your jurisdiction, or is it going to be the club that takes that insurance, or for you at the university, is it going to be the university taking that liability, or who does that fall under?
I can speak to the daily operations for my races group falls under my risk management. And so if we were to extend them the drone opportunity, and we own one within our police department, but it hasn't left the box yet.
Wow.
Because of all the challenges.
Wow.
And so that might be a good relationship because I already manage them well. I mean, we have a good working relationship, but they do fall under my risk management.
Wow.
And I would imagine we would extend that, but that's a great question for my legal department to follow through on.
Yes, sir.
So to give you some,
Oh,
we're
we.
recording this, so we
Yeah. There you are. Yes, sir.
So the liabilities is a very good, challenging question. One of the reasons why, or one of the important things to remember is if you use the Aries model and they are not 107 pilots, they cannot fly for you. You do not own their assets. You do not own any of their stuff. They can fly on their own unless the FAA puts a restriction in the whole area. And so that's something important to remember. You want them to be 107 pilots, which just came out in the August timeframe. So that's an important thing to know, because once they are 107, then they are held liable, and they can carry liability insurances, which are starting to, obviously insurance companies are trying to make their money, are coming out. But you have to work with your agencies. One of the reasons why we're going to that model of trying to umbrella it with the state is fighting with the state is always very challenging. So instead of 39, 40, how many counties you have, or agencies or cities going and trying to get this passed, we're trying to do an umbrella for everyone. And this is just an initiative on my end because I don't like duplication of effort. As an emergency manager, I want to do things once and let everyone else benefit from it.
Right.
And so with that capability, once you have that liability, and I'm still trying to figure that out with the state in doing that, and the privacy issues, everything else comes up, but you have to make sure you balance it. So my recommendation is do it collectively, bring all of your agencies in your region or in your state together to then go to the attorneys and say, hey, look at all of us here wanting to do this, rather than you're annoying me, I have other things to do than fly drones, especially if you have a non-drone friendly person to deal
Are
with.
there any other stories or yes, ma'am?
Good morning, I'm Jade Jeter-Hill. I'm with Edmonds Community College, which is just north of Seattle. And Pascal, you touched on this just a bit, but one of our big concerns as a campus, our college relations team went out and got themselves a UAV, and they fly it around to take really awesome pictures of really great student events for student engagement. And then somebody writes and says, how do I get a copy of that picture? How do I get a copy of that information? And when you take that and carry it out into a disaster situation, what are we doing? How are we managing that data and people's access to it? In Washington State, we have a very broad public records policy and public access. So how are we going to manage that information?
It's complicated.
Yeah, boy, is it complicated.
It's complicated. Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir.
I'm Pete Jensen. I'm with Ventura County Fire Department out in California, and we have a partnership with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, and we use their pilots or their deputies that are UAV trained and pilots gone through all the ground schools and all that, and then we purchased one of a duplicate UAV for the fire department, and so we have two of them in the county. We can use either one. And now they are available for response 24 hours a day, 365. And one of the things, what prompted me to kind of chime in a little bit, was your talk about the ownership of the data, the video or still photos or whatever. By the fact that the Sheriff's Department is flying it, it falls under their legal jurisdiction. So depending on what it is that they are flying over, Our partnership is primarily for hazardous materials incidents. So if at any point we say, well, it's under investigation, well, that locks everything down. Okay, so now all that, and then also as a fire district, we are not under the constraints of right to know, or that we have to distribute those because it's their property, it's part of the investigation. You know, they can lock that down from their standpoint through their legal means.
Right.
We don't own it. We can't be pressured into releasing it.
Wow.
Or anything of that sort.
You purchased the drone though, right?
We have one of the drones. They have a duplicate.
So you own the drone.
They own one of the
Yes,
drones.
we own one of them.
From my understanding, it may be different in your law, but because you own the drone, it's actually your asset that's being flown by a pilot license. So it's still part of the public record.
But it's under their COA.
I think what
and
we
it's
got
their
here,
operation. So
I think
yeah.
what we've got here, and this is great, Peter. Check this out. What we've got here is a complex environment for emergency management.
Yes, to say the least, it's
to say
complicated.
the least, which is why we're here. You had a question, sir?
I guess so.
Yes, it's complicated.
I just had a, we're battling right now, we're right next to Las Vegas, we're adjacent to Las Vegas. So our class airspace is class B mostly in our city. And so I was just wondering if anybody around here has had any success in getting class B airspace in their COA.
I have, there's a gentleman that I talked to, I got my own. There's a gentleman that I talked to, it was very interesting. I was reading an article, Montgomery County, Maryland. There's a gentleman there by the name of Mike. I won't give his last name. I'll just tell his story. And in 2013, his chief said, hey, get us a drone. Just like any good former military guy, 10 bags full, bow, drone. They're flying them in Montgomery County, 600 square miles. Whew. It's in airspace where the president FAA shows up along with a few other agencies and said, cease and desist. So of course, Mike, being the reasonable guy he is, ceased and desist. But he's flying today. I will give you his information because he's flying in an airspace that was completely difficult. And he says right now the DOD and the FAA worked with him and worked around to make sure that public safety did not suffer from bureaucracy. So I will give you his contact information. He can tell you how he went about doing what he did. And he wants you to give him a call. Yes, sir, in the corner over there. Yes, sir, you, believe it or not.
Yeah, Tom Metzler, Bergen County in New Jersey. So before I say anything, we do have a drone program in our jurisdiction. I do not fly. It's just a team that's part of my, my office. But we actually have flown within the 5-mile radius of Teterboro Airport.
Right.
Our pilots were in contact with the air traffic controllers. Mm-hmm. They actually were, or the control tower, I guess, and they were actually in communication. There was also helicopters working. You know, we had the ceiling of 400 feet. The helicopters had a minimum of 1,000 feet. And there was communications between the drone pilot and the helicopter pilots, and the drone pilots and the tower.
Right, and this is emergency management at its best. You know, coordinating, communicating. That's how it works. But we reach out to our partners. FAA, repeat it. The FAA are our friends. They're not our enemies. We don't like what's going on right now. It's not an easy situation, and we can see how this would really help us. But the faster we can work with them and give them information and share with them and reach out to all of our partners, the quicker we're going to help Congress. Remember, we've got people like Charles Schumer and others who actually get it. Sir, you had a question? We got to get you the mic there.
I was curious when you brought up Montgomery County. I'm in a national capital region.
Right.
30-mile regions.
Right. You go ahead and repeat that again.
So I'm from a national capital region jurisdiction, and we have from DC a 30-mile exclusion zone, which
Right.
is some of the most restrictive airspace.
Very.
Even some of the drone clubs, which are the biggest in the nation, are not allowed to fly within that airspace because it's so restricted and locked down.
Well, we know why, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. So I had not heard of our partner jurisdiction having that, so I do need to get that information.
I'll give you his email because he's allowed me to do that, and you can email him and talk to him, because he said he had a dickens of a time, and I think he ended up going to the governor's office and he actually got a waiver, and that's how he was doing. And they usually don't do that because they don't want the liability, because the minute your attorney general signs off on that, the FAA is like, okay, you're on your own, and so that's what I'm hearing is an issue. Are there any other questions, or yes, sir?
I do have one question. I had a conversation with somebody from Tim Butters from the FAA in regards to this topic and giving them information, and they really are looking for us to establish and give them the information of what we need. Right. You know, because they don't understand what our uses are.
Right.
They don't understand what emergency managers or fire departments, or they just don't understand the intricate operation of what we're trying to do. So when they put the regulations out, they're focusing on safety.
Right.
That's why we're limited to 55 pounds.
That's
well,
right.
55 pounds, and then you want to try to put a monitor on there for air monitoring or something of that sort.
Right.
Okay, we got to meet in the middle somewhere.
Right.
So my question to you is, or anybody here, is there a working group or a avenue to be able to give that input? Because I don't think I have yet to see any posting of a public comment or an industry comment session where we can meet with them and give them this information.
That is part of if an emergency management person was actually running this, there would be. We'd be able to go to a website, everybody would be able to go to the same website and go, here's my input, here's my story. This was the results of my IAP. This is what we did. But there isn't. But the names of some of these individuals I give you, that input will go in, and there will be a throughput for them to go, oh, well, I heard this from this guy, I read this here. So there are avenues where people can take this information in, and they will use it. That screen right there is me being visited by the gentleman I called Uncle. He's a 71-year-old surfer. Grew up in Hawaii, blonde, cool as heck. That's Ted Ralston at the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center in Hawaii. He sent me something the other day. He did a 40-plus mile canoe run, and then realized he was being chased by a shark and said, boy, I got out of there. I'm like, well, that's emergency management. But that's him giving me some training on a UAV when he visited me in Atlanta. He's a wonderful guy. This guy is willing to take your questions. If he doesn't have the answer, he knows who does. He's the ultimate consultant. So I will make sure you have access to his information. Are there any more stories from any individuals? You gentlemen want to say something, or you're awfully quiet? It's the quiet side here. Anybody else? Any stories, any questions, any ideas? Because I'll tell you right now what we've heard here, particularly that ham radio idea, that was excellent. That's one that I will use and plagiarize in the future. I will be saying, yes, sir.
Robert McCord, Macon-Bibb County, Georgia.
Hey, Robert. Oh, wow.
We've corresponded quite a bit.
This gentleman here, okay, Robert, I got to tell who it is. I got to tell Robert. Okay, remember earlier I was talking about the guy that was very frustrated that sent me the email? That's Robert, right. Welcome to IAEM. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Probably like put a face with a name.
That's fine.
You know, for years we've been dealing with this UAS stuff, and before the 107 came out, we just basically said, we're done. We had 4 UAVs in the county from different departments. We spent thousands of dollars on these aircraft, and every time we tried to put in a COA, it got rejected. So we just said, all right, we're done. Threw in the closet. And now with the 107, we're trying to actually kick it back up.
Right.
But again, the biggest thing that we're looking at right now is liability.
What is in our blood? What do we preach as emergency managers? Resilience. resilience. We stick with it. Because eventually, you're going to have what you need. Those airports and those heliports that you told me about in your email, they're not going to matter. They're not going to matter. You're going to get your UAV. You're going to have a story to tell, just like you're telling it now, and we're going to go forward.
Yeah, and our biggest issue there was 2/3 of our county was within that 5-mile zone of an
Right.
airport
Right.
or a helipad or something.
And Part
So it was-
101 is addressed that now, depending on if you deal with ATC and depending on the class, the airspace.
Just want to appreciate your assistance in all this.
No problem. I've been talking with him for a couple of months trying to help him out and put him in the right direction. I think the biggest thing is that we can do for ourselves is not giving up. How am I looking here? The biggest thing is not giving up. Welcome, even though you came in late, not a big to do. But that I think is the thing that we as emergency managers can. Emergency management profession is an unusual, very holistic, fluid environment. There's no other profession like ours. Water, geography, topography, air, we're the seals of professions because we do it all. And more than that, we're politicians because we have to be resilient, clever, cunning, resourceful. So let's help out our partners. Let's not bash the FAA. Let's work with them. And let's understand that what's really going on is Congress, for one of the first times that I have seen in my 59 years, I'm seeing that for the first time, Congress is being rational. I know it's complicated. Come on, one big one. It's complicated. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming.